So in this video, we're going to have a conversation about the purpose of consuming tonic herbs, things like reishi or gynostemma or chaga or cordyceps, the connections between this and how that fits into the greater scheme and purpose and paradigm of, let's say, healing in Chinese medicine. Now, it may initially sound like a lot of different things, but actually at the core, it's really all kind of the same and all very similar from a certain perspective. And that certain perspective would be obvious if we understand that all of these practices have at their root and their basis something which we might call Taoism, whatever that actually is and however we choose to define that. And really the purpose and the function is quite simple to understand, but like many things in this conversation, quite profound and difficult to really fathom and to really wrap our heads around. So if you have read any Daoist text or any books by people who are influenced by this line of thinking, there's a lot of talk about sort of turning back, or we could say undoing or non-doing or letting go, or finding a natural way. And this all sounds great, sounds like great little catchphrases, but what does it actually mean, and what's the simple way in which we can really understand it? Because if you're watching this video, odds are you probably are familiar with some of these practices, maybe you even practice them, maybe you even consume tonic herbs on a regular basis. And the perspective we're taking now is a little different than what most people try to do, because most of the information and conversation about these types of practices tends to be very acute and very kind of medicinal in a way, where it's like focusing on symptoms, focusing on treating this or balancing that or and getting really, in some ways, kind of mechanical, which obviously has its uses and benefits and applications in certain contexts. But in the greater scheme of things, I should say, we could really see that from a certain perspective, all of these different imbalances that we might experience really have at their root the same cause. And this is our way in which we can start to understand turning back, is what we mean. So what we mean is, taking it from the very beginning, we have what we could call Tao, whatever the hell that actually is. Or we could say the cosmos, or the natural way, the natural flow, or the natural path, or our congenital nature, or our true self. We could throw around all these words because we're really just trying to approximate something. Another way we might be able to approximate it is that it could be a feeling memory or a feeling state that is kind of stored in our cells or stored in our DNA or our genetic information. In a way, it's kind of a background from which we are oftentimes contrasting our life with. Meaning, if we feel afraid, we feel anxious, well, we only know we feel that as contrasted with something, because that's often how knowledge works. It works by contrast. And it works by, if you want to say you want to explain something, that means you want to basically lay it out on a plane, make it sort of like two-dimensional in a way so you could really sit there and look at it. But that's not really how life works or functions most of the time. So from this original state, then we often can depart from that. So we have an original fear that arises, or an original distrust that arises, which basically causes us in some ways to have two wills. We have kind of the natural way of things, we have our congenital nature, we have trust and flow and harmony, and then we have like what we might call bullshit actions, or spells, or false programs, or poison arrows, or whatever. And this is the open door from which we experience dis-ease, stagnation, and blockage. So what we mean by fear or distrust would be really departing from that feeling state or that memory in which we have inside of us, and could manifest as belief systems like, oh, in and of myself, I'm not okay. If I want to get something done, or once something needs to happen in my life, I have to use control and effort and force. And if I don't, then it won't happen. And we really get really caught up in doing and acquiring and forcing and trying to really contrive things. Which, when I said earlier, bullshit actions, it's often just based on fear and or mistrust. And what we mean by two wills, in a very simple, mundane way, is our brain says one thing, our body says something different. Our brain says, oh, well, I should do it, I have to do it, I must do it. If I don't do it, then this happened, this won't happen, blah, 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 make up all this stuff. And our body is like having a different reaction most of the time. So in a simple way, we have two wills, and we're kind of at odds with ourselves, and we experience dis-ease or a lack of ease. That then often transforms and manifests into patterns of stress, reflexive ways of responding to situations and responding to the world and relationships, and that forms and congeals, and that becomes our ego. That becomes our identity. That becomes who we think we are. And then that is what we are out in the mundane world, or the ego-based world, or the kind of emotional roller coaster up and down world. That's the kind of thing in which we are caught up in. Which kind of ironically, the I Ching calls that the demonic sphere of consciousness. Which is actually a really good name for it if you think about it. So, when we talk about turning back or finding a natural way, what we're kind of talking about is moving back from the mundane world and the ego and the stress and the fear and the distrust back to the natural way, or back to the trust, or back to that feeling state or that memory that we all have inside of us, and getting into, principles of non-doing, or principles of cosmic consciousness or cosmic harmony, or really however you want to look at that. And then moving out of the excessive and or deficient fear and stress-based patterns which cause the imbalance, which opens the door to the pathogen or the illness or the disease to come in and be able to live inside of us. Or it basically suppresses our natural chi or our natural response, and then a whole other thing happens. So, what do we mean? Long story short, well, if we're talking about say tonic herbs, for example, we're talking about reishi, for example, we're talking about wild ginseng or husha wu, things like that. We're talking about, in many ways, nurturing wisdom, nurturing the intelligence of the heart. And what does that mean? Well, people, if you read about tonic herbs, you're familiar with it, especially kidney tonifying herbs. People get really caught up in what they think Jing is and what they think Jing means. And people often fixate, oh, it's sexual fluids, it's sexual this, and that's what Jing is, so I have to, not ejaculate ever, and I have to conserve all these things. But what is often missed is the wisdom piece. Because if you've watched many of my videos on this channel, or you're a member of the Hyperion Academy, which hopefully you are, then you'll see that there's a lot of conversation about things which are perhaps more mental or psychological. And some people might realize, well, why is that important? What does that have to do with tonic herbs? What does that have to do with any of this conversation? Well, it actually has everything to do with it, because if you look at just basic mundane 101 5-element theory, we could call it 5 elements or 5 phases or 5 processes or 5 dynamics or whatever, but that's indicative that it's just this moving thing. It's a frequency which can manifest on different levels in different avenues in different ways. So physiologically it can manifest in a way, psychologically, spiritually, emotionally. So we could talk about the kidney physiological effects, or we could talk about the psycho-spiritual emotional process of wisdom. And we're talking about the same energy. We're interfacing in just a different, deeper way. Because the thing is if all you do is take a product and all you do is focus on the physiological effects, that's fine, but that's one piece. Because we have to ask, well, what is the point? What is this trying to do? A lot of people take kidney herbs because they want to have stronger erections. Cool, which is fine, I guess, if that's what you need. But there's also much deeper aspects which we could explore and in some ways increase the results that we're getting from the said product. So really the point of this video and most videos that I'm doing is basically trying to broaden the horizon so that we can all interface and work with these energies in much deeper and more profound and, more importantly, more effective ways. So anyways, a little tangent. Anyways, getting back to the point, we're talking about going back, trying to return back to a place of feeling more harmonious. Basically, just getting out of the fear and the distrust and the two wills to where we feel more whole within ourselves. So what we mean is, if, for example, you take reishi, you take Wu, and it chills you out and relaxes you, that's often similar to if you do Qigong for a while and you get chilled out and relaxed. Or you get an acupuncture session, you get chilled out and relaxed. The thing is when we feel really good and relaxed and centered in our body, it's a bit more difficult to be an asshole. It's a bit more difficult to want to get upset or to want to get stressed or to want to do things that you don't want to do. And within that simple, easy, obvious process, there's a lot of wisdom. Which actually, I realized I never finished that thought. So what do we mean by wisdom? Well, we can talk about simply to act or not, to move or not, to advance or not. Simple binary choice, which we all face every day, all the time. And to me, that's a little bit more important and meaningful and impactful than many other conversations that are out there in the world, because that's what makes up our life. That's what makes up how we experience reality. And if we're making those decisions without wisdom, or making those decisions based on the fear and the distrust, odds are it's just going to really enforce a pattern of excess or deficiency. Which is an interesting thing, because oftentimes when I used to do consultations, and sometimes when I still do, people just want, what should I take? What should I take? What should I take? Should I eat this? Should I eat that? Yes, it's a part, it's a piece, it's a frequency. But we have to realize that, well, what is the thing that's destabilizing and undermining the balance or the vitality of the structure in the first place? Oftentimes, if you look at it, well, how much energy are you expending for work, for relationships, for leisure activities versus taking a product? You take a product, that's 10 seconds out of your day. Okay, well, what about the rest of your decisions? What about how you're doing the rest of your life? What about how you're relating to people? What about how you're relating to yourself? What about the work that you're doing? What about all of these ways in which energy is being circulated and exchanged in our life? So in some degree, it's a very limited perspective, both from practitioners and from clients, wherein we only really want to focus on just this little piece of our life. If I just eat the right thing and take the right supplements, that's it. It's like, okay, well, what about you as a person? What about how you relate to yourself? If you fundamentally believe that in and of yourself you're not okay, and that you have to prove all of these things in your life and be all of these things that you don't really want to do, there's only so much that herbs and diet and exercise can really do for you. Because it's really basically as simple as kind of like being a drug addict and medicating. And this is oftentimes why people get really into alcohol, really into very extreme habits, is because they're medicating. So the real trick is finding some balance, finding some harmony, and finding more of that feeling state inside of ourselves, so that we don't necessarily feel inclined to go to extremes anymore. And then we don't need as much. And because we're not trying to climb out of a hole, then we're able to perhaps glean more from less and invest that energy in other avenues. So it's just a really key thing that a lot of people just flat out don't want to deal with. It's easier to throw money at a bottle of something than examine why we might not love ourselves very much, or why we might enter into relationships and entertain relationships that are destructive, or do work that we hate, or treat people in a way in which we don't feel good about. It's very simple, very basic things, but the point is all this stuff goes together, and it should go together. And the more they do come together, the more powerful the results will be. Which, if we're investing money in supplements and in products and in herbs, which hopefully you are, then wouldn't it make sense to also invest time and energy in these other areas of ourself? Because really all we have is this body, this mind, this awareness, this lifetime, this moment. That's all we got. So where else are we going to go? What else are we really going to focus on? We could go down the path of the angry, bitter conspiracy person who blames the world and blames the government, the World Banking Association, the environment, and blames all these things and is super angry about it. Or we can, acknowledge, be informed, whatever we need to do, whatever we want to do, and realize that, well, if I feel pissed off, it's because I feel pissed off. If I'm blaming someone over there, who's feeling the negative consequences? Who's exerting the stress and anxiety and tension? Not them, just us. So really, where else are we going to focus and put our attention? Which that's going to bring up other issues for people, because if people have issues around this, then it's going to be like, oh, that's so selfish. That's so self-absorbed. You can't do that. And it goes back to the exact patterns which I just identified, which is, oh, if I don't do it, if I don't make it happen, then who's going to do it? Who's going to make it happen? How's it going to happen? It won't happen. I have to do it. I think that's what a lot of people believed, and then we can look at history and see that it didn't really pan out too well for them personally, and probably for their movements as well. But really, the bigger lesson, the bigger point there is, well, what's our belief? What's our paradigm about the nature of the world, the nature of ourselves, and where are we putting our trust? Or do we even have any trust? It's just deeper questions to ask. But anyways, and the last thing we'll say on that to finish it up is that really we can't give what we don't have. So if we're not taking care of ourselves, we don't have any love and compassion and acceptance for ourselves, then it's pretty damn hard to give that away to other people. Pretty challenging to receive it from other people as well. So from a certain perspective, a lot of what I'm saying could be perceived as whatever, but it's actually quite the opposite. Because the thing is, the better you feel, the more centered and calm and at peace inside yourself, the more you want to share that with other people, and that's the more your default response. And the more people feel it around you without even having you to do anything. It's just a natural response. So, and then if you're operating from that mindset, then the actions that you take will probably be a bit more harmonious. And it's just the easiest way to understand it is something that we can all understand, meaning if you're super pissed off, probably not a good time to make a decision. It's probably not going to pan out too well. Everyone knows, well, just calm down, just give it some time, and then when you're more calm. But the thing is, these deeper processes are operating in our psyche. We don't even see it. We're just doing it without even questioning it. But that's really the point, is these practices can help us see, oh, crap, wow, I'm doing that. Ooh. So that's how I'm relating to this, or that's how I'm symbolizing or conceptualizing this kind of process within myself and in other people. Perhaps that's a bit excessive or deficient or whatever. So if we're taking tonic herbs, we're investing in ourselves, we are getting practices and doing practices, then we want to eventually move to that place. Maybe, I don't know. It's just an opinion. Just a suggestion. And that is somewhat verified by 5-element theory, because if you look at it, all of the organs have emotions, but they also have virtues or higher aspects, or whatever the hell you want to call that. Because the thing is that the nature of our experience is probably infinite, very likely to be that. So we're just constantly going around in circles and riding these ups and downs and waves. I don't know, maybe there's more that we could be doing and or experiencing if we are open to it, or if it's appropriate or correct or whatever. But anyways, this video is much longer than I had originally anticipated. So hopefully it's opened the perspective a little bit on part of the purpose, or at least one of the purposes, because all these things have many purposes, actually maybe they don't have any purpose at all, depending on how you want to look at it. But for the sake of conversation and conceptual relating and explaining things, laying it out on a plane for us to look at, Yeah, hopefully it works and makes some sense. So yeah, moral of the story: take tonic herbs, work on yourself, balance. I don't know. Hopefully that makes sense. But thanks for watching. Thanks for watching all the videos, hopefully. And I will talk to you soon.